Yeah, so a bit of housekeeping. So in the two previous powers, actually we talked about Tesla's largest battery in the world and how it would how it was supposed to help South Australia with the blackout issues they experienced over the recent years. And one remaining open question was, with what precision, specifically a New York Times article talked about this battery and its capabilities. And so I just want to read three quotes from that article that should clarify it. So one is, debate over the battery's potential has become intense. And then later on, regardless, experts say the moment of disruption is here. And then they quote Scott Morrison, who at the time was treasurer in Australia, and I think he's now prime minister. And he said 30,000 South Australian households could not get through watching one episode of Australia's Ninja Warrior with this big battery. And so
which
that's a
is
very,
which is a great quote. But I assume these are in order. Is that right?
yeah,
Is
they're
this
in
one
order.
later?
They're in
Yeah,
order.
because the way I remember in high school journalism, we learned that journalistic writing is different from other types of writing, in that you put the view is the most important things go first. Whereas in other kinds of writing, you can't really think of it that way, because if you're, say, building up an idea, you're saying this idea is true. Really, every part of it is crucial to establishing the idea. But because journalism is just claiming to report on the world, it's really just giving you the most important details first and then the least important details later. So I like how it's a detail that experts say the moment of disruption is here, regardless of the specific nature of this battery. And it turns out, if you read later, the claim that it cannot have even power 30,000 households watching 1 hour of a TV show, the moment of disruption is here. That's a good refrain. It's like, uh, it would just be like saying, regardless of how much money I lost last year, the moment of success is here. Like, no, the whole thing is, the moment of disruption is an example of, that's an abstract idea that needs a lot of validation. So if the one example that you have invalidates it, then the moment is not here.
Yeah, I also want to add, like, I can read the entire article because it's too long, of course. But so they had this, critics say this and advocates say this, but the experts say the moment of disruption is here. And so they set this up like something. Okay, politicians are fighting over this, but you have this 30,000 South Australian households, which probably nobody reading the New York Times has any context to, like, what percentage of the population is this, and so on. So I think South Australia has 1.7 million citizens, and it's a hint at that this battery is not going to solve any blackout issues, but it's a very obscure way of conveying that fact. So it's almost as if someone wants to get away with technically not lying.
I think one service that we can provide the world with this show, and I try to think of it in my other work too, is just to cause people to have a lot of have a really good filter when it comes to sources in the mainstream knowledge system, and I mean in any knowledge system. And part of having a good filter is just the recognition that even institutions with a lot of prestige do very non-objective and sometimes dishonest things. So I just encourage people to keep in mind, when you see something in the New York Times, keep in mind this kind of distortion where the reality has been completely misrepresented. And then one idea I read about a couple months ago, maybe, I was rereading Jurassic Park, which I had not read since maybe I was 13 or 14. And I was interested in, oh no, wait, I'm sorry. It wasn't Jurassic Park. That's what got me back into Crichton. But then I started reading State of Fear, which I'm still early on in, but I was interested in some of the essays he had. And I might be getting the name wrong, but Crichton has this really good point about, he calls it something like the Murray-Gell-Mann um, idea, and Murray was some sort of scientist, and I apologize for maybe butchering the name and then not having the exact profession. But the idea was he observed, according to Crichton, that when you know about a lot about a subject, you read the newspaper and you think, oh, well, this is just totally wrong. Like, how could they distort this? And then you read the rest of the paper and you think, oh, yeah, well, of course, this is happening in foreign policy. And of course, this is happening in domestic policy. Well, that seems perfectly reasonable. And so, just given that, when you hear people who really know about something, they will almost invariably criticize the mainstream knowledge sources, which shows that there are fundamental methodological problems with those on those issues, but it strongly indicates there are those problems on other issues, particularly when they're trying to quote unquote report on very abstract questions, which is that's a general vice in journalism, where journalists, for a whole host of reasons, I think that they can just report the truth about very complex issues, but they can report it the same as if they were to say, oh, well, JFK got shot yesterday, and then Australia had a moment, what was it? Australia had a moment of disruption with batteries yesterday. Like, those are considered the same thing. And when you consider those the same thing, when you treat ideas that require a lot of proof as if they're just direct observations that a journalist can make, then you are completely vulnerable to false ideas and to accepting them uncritically. So just some thoughts about processing news or claims to news or claims to about ideas in the so-called news.